Hello, welcome to Only God Rescued Me. Today, I have Kimberli Koen with us, and I'm very excited. She is an SRA victor. Thank you, Brian. And she is coming to us through her experience that she is using to start a nonprofit. So the things that were not available to her as she was healing, she is determined to make available to survivors as they are healing. She has a lot of really important things to say, and I know you'll enjoy hearing her. Welcome, Kimberli.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, and your cat, who is very gorgeous.
Oh, saw her on screen. I'm like, oh, hi.
I love it.
I won't get distracted. I will, but I'll stay.
She'll bring a lot of love in. So tell me about your past.
Okay, so I am here as a victor. I do love that. I've written it down. I really want to start incorporating that. And just, like where I am right now, I'm an advocate. I've worked as a case manager. I am the founder of this nonprofit, the Healing Center for Complex Trauma. And so my life's work is this, and bringing hope and healing to survivors, as well as resources and support to providers and the support system. And you use the word, I think you used healed. I don't know. I'm still healing. It is a freaking long process, but you stand where you are. So I have this much strength. So I stand in this space. But a lot of the work and things that people can relate more to with my history is the use of the word trafficking, like human trafficking. And I was adopted at birth, i.e. trafficked into a family where the whole intent and purpose was to destroy me, break me down mentally, kind of create a drone, someone that they could control and manipulate. And I was ritually abused, satanic ritual abuse, and tortured for almost 21 years. And my mom was not aware of that extreme abuse. She was dealing with her own domestic violence and issues. And so we were all like brutalized every single day by my adopted father. I just call him Orville. And so she didn't see a lot of the deeper stuff. So she was not the source of that, but Orville and his family and their friends and their colleagues, and they, that was the source. But it was pervasive. It was nearly every day. There were periods of time I lived in Wyoming, so some of the abuse was spread out a little bit by maybe a few months. But while I lived with Orville, and it was bad. It was daily brutalization, and then extended trauma and torture over different holidays and seasons and weekends, as people know what that entails. So it was pretty horrific. And then of course I had maladaptive things, like an eating disorder that it was very, very awful, cutting and flashbacks, and just I didn't know what was wrong with me. I knew something was wrong with me, but I didn't know anything was what was wrong with me, with my behavior and my outbursts and my running and my extreme, just kind of brutalization of myself. And when I was 19, I tried to suicide again, and I ended up in the hospital because the dam of memories had just broken loose, and I started remembering the SRA types of trauma. And I couldn't not see the everyday, like beatings and things like that, but the sexual abuse and the other torture I had suppressed. And we can talk about that because I think that's a miracle God gave me, because it did help me survive. But at some point I couldn't contain it. I couldn't hold it back anymore. And I just started remembering. And then I tried to suicide, and then it was another couple of years because I didn't understand, you know, dissociation. I didn't understand DID. I didn't understand the control and the hold that abusers have. And so it took me a couple more years to get out. But I moved, changed my name, tried to go low and underground so no one would find me. But it's been a long haul of remembering and finding my voice, finding my power, and holding on with, fingernails to that power. But here I am, and I'm a witness of the atrocities, but I'm also a witness of the resiliency of spirit and hope. I hope, the whole thing. I'm hoping to do something with all of it, and just.
That's amazing, because it's so easy being a survivor to just fall apart and not be able to get up and get going ever again. And that would be completely understandable, right?
I have for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it took me, I think, 20 years before I could really get moving and really be able to talk about it without falling apart. So, are survivors broken?
You know what? Survivors are, I probably use the word I'm broken a lot. However, that's in relation to what we perceive as normal or not. I think if you ask any person, like we discussed, that everyone has brokenness. Brendan Manning, he treats brokenness so gently. He says, an attempt to like hide our scars and wounds from people, we and that brokenness, we can't bring it into the light. We can't let the love of others basically heal us, or our wounds and scars help heal others. So I think the answer people might want is no, we're not broken, but we all are. But there are ways that we broke under the strain of torture and trauma that I feel like God, he would never, ever, 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 ever condone trauma, ever, or the mistreatment of his children, ever. But he gave us this capacity in our minds to split, to break, to go over there while what is happening here is so horrific, and anyone would just crumble under that pressure. So I feel like it's brilliant when I can see it as brilliant and not heartbreaking. That
Yeah.
we've been able to access a part of our brains that most people don't ever go to. And not only have we accessed it, but we've mastered it in so many ways. We found ways to cope and survive where other people would not be able to. So it's like a yes and no. There's this beauty in breaking. I'm sure you've heard of kintsugi. So it's a Japanese art where a pot or some kind of cup or bowl, if it is broken, they don't throw it away.
Oh,
They
yeah.
put it back together with precious metals. And not only is it more beautiful after the kind of putting back together, it's more valuable, because of the process, and it takes time and it takes love, and no, it isn't what it once was. It is something new, but it's beautiful and stunning, and holds a space that it couldn't before. So it's complicated. There isn't like a solid answer of, this is exactly, we don't want to be broken in these ways. It is an atrocity. It is against God and against our spirits to have been tortured and mistreated in this way. But the light in us, the God that is in us, Christ in us, has helped hold those pieces together in such beautiful ways that we don't always attribute to beauty, but it's amazing. It's incredible.
Well, I see you talking about this as beautiful in that God has helped you to get through those difficult years, and the way that he's bringing healing to you. And being the advocate now that you are, you wouldn't be there. You wouldn't be able to impact this world like you can at being a survivor. And that's beautiful.
I had an experience one time, and it really changed my life and the way I look at my scars, because I am literally covered in scars, all of me. And I was at an event where people learned my story. It was a big deal. And I was on the screen, and I didn't realize everyone had seen my arms, but the camera had zoomed in. And I was in crisis. It was a hard situation. It ended well. It was okay. But the following day, a woman walked by that was crying, and I'm definitely a get in your business kind of person. I tried to make eye contact, and she avoided me. So I'm like, okay. And then just within a few seconds, she came back and just stood there sobbing. So I got up, put my arms around her, my friend and we talked to her and tried to get her support. And then I saw her again the next day, which I did not expect because there are so many people there. It was just one of those things, God had to will that. And she said, I saw you, but I didn't recognize you. And so I walked by, but then I saw your arms and I knew who you were, and I knew I could talk to you. So I came back, and
Wow.
that changed my life. It wasn't like in spite of my scars, maybe I'll find something I can do. And then, it was like, oh my gosh, this kind of gives me my license to be in this space of sadness, of vulnerability, of opportunities to heal. And so she invited me in, and I'm not kidding. I tell that story a lot because it impacted me so much. And then to bring that back to Christ, I was telling that to my friend, and she said, isn't it interesting that Jesus, when he came back, he kept his scars, so we would know that we can talk to him.
Yeah.
It's like he could have come back anyway, to show this is what resurrection is about. And of course it is, but he kept that so we would know that we can go to him. So, it's all interconnected, and it's an honor. I don't look at my scars in horror anymore. I look at them as, these are my credentials in some ways, to be here. And it's hard. You don't ever want to be in that space as far as the journey, but it's also an honor and something I would not trade for anything at this point.
Well, there's so many people in the world that are hurt. And when they know that you're hurt too, then you're safe because you're not the abuser, right?
Right.
And your scars attest to that, which I love. It's
Yeah.
power. It's really powerful.
I feel like if we can look at ourselves and the things that not only were done to us, but that we've had to do, in this type of trauma, we were forced to do things against our natures, against God, that, were meant to entrap us and change our ideas of who we are. And they have in many ways. I spent many years fully believing I was evil and dark, and not ever feeling like I made a choice. But in a situation, you have to make a choice. It's like your hand is forced. And realizing that anguish of spirit was because the light in me was pushed up against this darkness that didn't belong in here, that was foreign. Like I feel like our struggle and that fight inside, and is just testament that we are so innately good. And if we weren't, we wouldn't be affected. We wouldn't be, have abhorrence to the things that have happened. And so I feel like if we can regard ourselves, Brennan Manning, and I did write it down. He says, define yourself radically as one beloved by God This is the true self. Every other identity is an illusion. And, the identities that people tried to force on us. I maybe I'm alone in that, but I don't feel like I am, that we were someone else or something else, that this was our path. This is who we are. That was a forced illusion. But the identity that we have inside of us is as children of God, as Christ is in us. And so I've had experiences with some of my parts, because I do have DID. I think most or several or to most do, who are probably listening if they are victors. Like they've not wanted to come into the light to share their story, the things that they've had to do, because they're so dark and so vile. And I've just had moments where I've just talked to them and I'm like, you don't understand, by you doing this and trying to save me from this by holding the memory, staying over there with it, you're innately good. Your intentions are good. So it's like you can't undo that truth. And so the more I regard my parts with kindness and love, and receive their experiences, as horrific as they are, in kindness and love, the more healing happens. And I don't know, it's beautiful and honest. It has to, it is honest. You're great. It's like, yeah, they can see through that. So
Yeah. Well, and I think it's an important piece for people who are not victors of SRA to understand. Dissociation is those little pieces of us that break off to hold that, to do that in that piece, that ritual, or, that theme in a ritual, and they handle that. And then, yeah, we got to go and communicate with them and talk to them and bring Jesus to them.
yeah, bring the light. And, especially in the world of Christianity, where, at least for me, a lot of things were done in the name of God, or to pervert that light, that being. And so I've had moments where if people talked of God to me, it was a trigger. It was painful.
Sure.
I have scars on me from someone telling me God loves you. It's like, because in that moment, that was a big trigger to some pain and suffering. So sometimes we, especially for people who are listening, who are maybe supporters, sometimes you can't use those words. And it's not a bad thing, but you can show love. You can show that light. One of my favorite quotes is, at all times preach the gospel, and when necessary use words. It's like we can minister without word and scripture. And when they can receive, or when we can receive word and scripture, bring it. The scriptures are full of those promises and that hope, but it's like we kind of have to gauge where someone is and what they can receive. But at no point can they not receive light and love in some form. And so we just have to be creative with our delivery.
And be watchful, see how they respond,
Yeah.
pull back from those places and, go in a different direction, I think is important. And understanding too, with worshiping God, it's you and God, and, it's love going back and forth. But when the rituals where they are worshiping Satan, because it's satanic ritual abuse, they do it through blaspheming God. So they bring in those Christian elements, which then become confusing to the victors, because sometimes they don't see the difference. And then the elements themselves are very tricky, like communion, horrific thing for victors to have to go to church and have communion. It just is, and until you understand why,
Right.
you're like, well, why wouldn't you have communion? What's the matter with you?
Yeah. Especially when you are, when your trauma starts at that developmental, age, when you're a tiny child. So all of the input coming into you is forming your map of the world, of yourself, of who other people are. Are you safe? Are you worthy? All of these things. if all that input that's coming in, and maybe not all, like I have my mom, my grandma, and my aunt. I have three people that I can attribute to me having any sense of just anything in me that didn't get squashed. But the map, and so that is all things sacred, all things that are helpful and hopeful. They purposely destroy them so you have nothing. So there's nowhere for you to turn ever. The last thing they want is for you to have a faith in relationship with Jesus Christ and God. And so they do everything they can to pervert that. And part of that is to just literally destroy you as a person and as a being, but also to hide their secrets, to keep those, and to not ever give you that space to put your feet down, to grasp hold of something bigger and better, and certainly not to recognize who you are, the I am, the Jesus, the God in you. Once you get hold of that, you're unstoppable. And they do everything they can to hold it back. But man, once you have it, it's like, okay, look out. It's over. You're done.
And that's where the real healing is. And that's the thing that really breaks my heart for non-Christian survivors. If, they used God in the rituals to try to break us. And it takes, the enemy is always trying to take away our identity or to chop our identity into pieces, where God's the only one that can go in and take those pieces and put us back together.
Yeah, I firmly believe he does and will, even if someone is not Christian, if they're not affiliated with a faith, because we're all his children. There's no hierarchy. There's no us and them. It's a we. And so again, like I've worked with enough people that they cannot associate with Christians, because
Right.
it's associated with too much pain. But we can still offer that love and healing through their language, like through the universe, or and it's not at all disregarding Christ and that power. It's bringing it to them in a way that they can relate to, and still offering that healing and hope. And so yeah, one of my favorite pastors is Levi Lesko, and he talks about kind of changing your language, I guess, based on who you're talking to. You would talk with a theologian a lot differently than you would with a skateboarder. It's like you just adapt the same truth, the same love and message to the language that they can understand.
That's good.
So,
You talked earlier, because we talked before we started, about being in places trying to get help early on, and you really just didn't get it. Can you go into some of that?
oh my gosh, yes, I swear it's, oh, well, for a long time, again, I did not understand that I had such pervasive, deep-rooted trauma. I was that girl that had almost 4.0. I was a cheerleader. I was on the swim team. I was happy. I was all these things, and then abused every single night. My DID was pretty solid. It was really good. But I'd be so freaking tired, and I wouldn't know what was wrong with me, or how to explain what these marks were. And so starting even in high school, I was having flashbacks, and I didn't know what they were. We thought they were seizures, if those relives or abreactions or whatever you want to call it. And so even starting it at that point, no one recognized trauma. So of course I'm having these issues at school. So who do they call? My abuser to get me from school. Then I'm now home rather than in a safe place, which is school, which wasn't safe most of the time because I was so bullied up until my last 2 years of school. It was awful. Childhood was terrible. It was so hard. And then I'd just be in trouble for causing trouble at school. So I'd go home to abuse from reliving abuse. And so, even starting at that elementary space where it would have been really great for someone to recognize there's something going on here. Behaviors, eating disorder, flashbacks, she's, erratic, takes off running, starts, falls asleep standing up, just, so, and I have been working with some different nonprofits to help educate, the education system and, and police officers and things like that to just see this as more than, some behavior. But then when I started remembering and I overdosed and, I was put in the psych ward and, it really was about trying to manage the symptoms, which I was at that point because everything had just gone insanely just bad inside of me. I mean, I cracked, I can't explain how bad it was, but it was bad. It's like every memory just started just pushing its way. And I had no coping skills. I had no power at that time. And so I was restrained so many times because of flashbacks. I was put in seclusion, in like urine smelling, stained small rooms that probably were worse than they would have in jail because of flashbacks or, and I honestly don't know the rationale. Protect me from myself, I don't know, but it was so traumatizing. No one was really understanding what was going on.
And
I
it's
felt
the
like,
worst thing you can do for a survivor of SRA, to
yeah,
restrain them, to put them in a little room. It's like cage sort of thing. Yeah.
or medicate, like
Yeah.
I'm suddenly like conked out, my power's gone. Because of course, all of those things were used, medication and drugs to distort memory or forget or, whatever. And so I found that the abuse was being just perpetuated and just compounded in a lot of the healing environments that I was seeking or not seeking, being blue sheeted because you overdose and stuff like that. But and then I found a couple of therapists that one was very green but they ended up abusing me in many
Oh.
ways. And so the idea that there was safety or that there was anyone that would be able to see me as myself, because there's healing from this takes a long time. And I mean, we're talking a lifetime. It doesn't mean that there isn't progressive healing, and you can look back and say, oh, look how far I've come. But triggers don't just go away. Again, that map of the world, Bessel van der Kolk talks about it. It doesn't ever go away. We can bring new input, we can bring new information, new experiences, and add it to the map, but the map doesn't go. So those triggers, they're there, and we can learn to override. We can learn that we're safe. We can learn to, work with our nervous system and calm it down and be aware, all that, but it doesn't go away. And so I had such bad experiences with therapists. And then at some point they'd be so frustrated with me and just like, well, you just don't want to get well. What are you getting from this? And I'd hear that in the hospitals, like, what are you getting from all of this? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I getting from this? A lot of scars, no dignity at all, a lot of people abandoning me. So, I'm not exactly sure how I'm winning here. And just people just judging your character because you're struggling, because this horrific thing has caused such, a massive reaction that is ongoing. And then when you're multiple, and I didn't recognize that for years into healing, what that was or how bad it was. It's those parts just pop in or they don't, and they hold things that maybe you're not aware of. And it was not understood. Even people that said they didn't. And I'm so one of the things that I do that I am so grateful to be in a space to do it is to help educate. This is trauma. This is the impact of trauma on the brain, and specifically complex trauma. I was buying all of the lies and all of the things that therapists were saying to me, or hospital personnel, that I was bad. It just reinforced all of those things, reinforced every message we have. And then I read The Body Keeps the Score, which I really recommend. If you're a victor, if you're a survivor, maybe, go easy. It is a hard read, if you're vulnerable, but it was the first time in my life that I was able to understand that, yeah, I actually have brain damage. Something impacted my brain. It's not my personality. It's not my will. It's not me being a brat. It's not me, whatever people would say about me. That I'm like, this is literally something you can look at on a brain scan and see the brain go offline when you're triggered, and see why you're reacting in this way, because your primitive brain is now in charge. It's overridden any part of the thinking mind. And so I do a lot of educating and supporting, with that information. And it's like, as a survivor, as a victor, I can say, this is how it shows up. And as I've also been a provider, I can say, this is what you might see. So I kind of have these two vantage points. And then what is helpful, and there aren't perfect answers. Of course, there are scenarios you can't, think about or anticipate, but, the more we know and the more we see someone as a person. Father Greg Boyle from Homeboy Industries, I just love him so much. He talks about, instead of raising the bar for people to measure up, he talks about holding the mirror up to them so they return to themselves, which is that one beloved by Christ. And it's like, if we see that core of who they are and not just this behavior, and like I have not gone down the road of addiction, but by the grace of God go I. I've done a lot of other things that are really scary and awful, and my friends still see me, and that's shocking, and I've had people not see me, but I'm in an environment now where they see me, and because they see me and they tell me who they see, I want to believe it. And so I'll start acting and playing with the idea, that there's light in me. At one point, if you told me there was light in me, I would have gone and overdosed. Or cut. Like, that's where I was. I'm like, you don't know. I have fooled you. I am evil. And I would go and destroy myself. And then I have friends that, well, I'm going to keep saying it till you believe it. And I'm like, it literally hurts. I can't hear that. And then I wanted to believe it. And then I started living in it. And I'm like, it's true for all of us, but it does take time. But yeah, I think we're understanding trauma more. We are having the discussions. I recently was in the hospital and they were so backwards, I couldn't even believe it. They just had no idea how to interact with me with my flashbacks. And I'm like, who has not read The Body Keeps the Score? Are you kidding me? So it's obviously, there's so much work that needs to be done. But I feel like if we are aware of our egos as providers, if their response to us and what we bring isn't about us and whether we're really good at what we do, but it's about their level of pain and their ability to respond and align, it's, if we realize we're literally working with each other, we're co-creating this journey. It's just the respect, the awe. Again, Father Greg Boyle, he works with ex-gang members, so of course there's profound trauma and histories of doing things that, they might not do if they had not been traumatized. But I lost my train of thought because of you. Kitty.
Father Boyle talking to ex-gang members.
Oh, I've lost it. It'll come back.
That's fine.
I think I went off really long with your question, and I apologize.
No,
there's
that's
so
fine.
many things that go into anything.
Right. No, you're doing a great job. A lot of people think that people that talk about trauma are bringing up the past when they should just be living in the present. You know,
Um,
forget, just go on with now you're fine, so just don't think about it. So how do you respond to that?
I respond to it like this. Like when I am training and having a discussion, that is not nice. Stop it, Kat. So I bring up, most everyone has been in an auto accident or has had their heart broken or something. And without even thinking about it, or maybe with thinking about it, maybe when you're driving, you don't go to that intersection anymore or for a really long time. Or maybe you find you're there and you didn't anticipate it, and suddenly you're like, you remember like what happened. It's that's something I think most people can relate to with, you know, maybe a mild or an extreme trauma, depending on how bad it was. It's something you don't will. It's something that just comes. And there's something to bringing the truth into the light and being seen and heard and loved when these things were so secret and they're so shameful and horrific. And when you're met with people don't even believe it's real, let alone why are you still bothered by this? You know, that's a hard place to be. And so it is, you know, if someone has lost a child in 5 years, do they not mourn that loss? You know, if someone has had a life event that would take a lot of people out, do they just forget? You know, they don't. And of course, we're moving on. We're living, we're doing these things. But it is part of, gosh, I wish it weren't as much part of my life. You know, I
Sure.
navigate my entire day based on, you know, like how am I doing? I mean, I make my solid plans, but I get hijacked, you know, often. But it's like I need to avoid triggers. I need to, in order for me to stay in power, I have to do these things, listen to my Christian music, read my scripture, talk to my friends, do these empowering things like this. You know, this is meaningful to me. This is part of my coping. And but I can't do it if I'm, you know, bombarded by triggers. And it, again, it's so pervasive, especially if it happened in childhood, where that map, where our orientation towards the whole entirety of our world, people, life, where we live, what we eat is created. We just can't filter it out. We are amazing and we navigate, but telling us to be quiet and to not speak that because other people are uncomfortable, you know, or they're making judgment based on their own experience with overcoming or whatever. It's not right. It's not fair. It's not honest. You know, people should be able to speak their truth. And that's something that we have fought for, to have a voice.
Survivors, victors, I'm still working on changing that vernacular, go into dark places, you know, periodically. So I was in one last week, just had a pretty bad PTSD meltdown, and it took me days to recover. What advice do you have to help people through those times and how to come back out of that?
Oh my gosh, I spent a lot of time there still. I mean, I'm like in such a place of advocacy and, you know, strength. And then so just that experience of being there is so frightening. And of course, you're back there. You are in real time, it feels, in the experience. And then for me, you know, like I do struggle with being suicidal, and I have a lot of fight in me and I'll fight, fight, fight. But every once in a while when it hits, I want it to be so bad that it takes me, like, this is the one. I'm out. I'm done with this suffering. I'm done with this struggle. So it's like I have a mixed relationship with it sometimes, not always. That's rare. But every once in a while when I'm like, I really can't. God, I am telling you, I can't, like, tap out. I'm done, done, done. It's like I kind of want to cross over and just be done. But I do have angels and people, which this getting back to how do you get out, the community and kinship and people who speak truth and love and light, who bring that to us, are so important. And I'm blessed to have several. And even if that will say, Kim, I know you feel this now. We need you. We want you, your mission. They know the things that are important to me. And so they'll bring those up. And, with DID, I'll forget that I'm even a mom. I'll forget that I just rode my bike for, 50 miles or, because you're back there. And although our history would say it doesn't last forever, it feels like it will. And so if you can navigate and be telling yourself, I'm going to get through this, and then bring in the troops. I have my people, I'll SOS text them. Sometimes all I need is a little text, and sometimes they come on over, just to help. But it's remembering truth. It takes such intention to pierce that darkness with the light, and it is here, it's present. And then also, sometimes if I'm having a flashback or something, it's because I need to see it. And so it just takes a lot of courage to see what is pressing into that space, because our reactions to trauma is to avoid pain. We want to go, we want to run, we want to flee. But sometimes the way out is through. I hate that so much, but it's true. And so sometimes I find my way out by just stopping and saying, okay, show me what you have. Tell me what you need to tell me. And then that pressure is relieved, and they're able to rest. And of course, I'm heartbroken. It's hard, it's sad, but that pressure is kind of relieved. So it's mixed. Like, there are a number of things. I have my Christian music that I constantly have on that drives my kids crazy, but I do what I have to do, to pull out. You have to want it, which is really hard to do. And if you don't want it, you need to have some people around that want it for you until you can want it, that will rally and, again, speak truth and love. And Bruce Berry talks about, people being the agents of change and healing. It's people that broke us, to use that word. It's people that cause this harm and deep ache that is soul deep, but it's people that are the ones that heal that. It's like, how can the same, thing, people, cause the destruction and heal the destruction? It just doesn't seem like it would take both, but it does. And if you don't have your people that are safe, find someone online or, some kind of advocate, a source, like To Write Love on Her Arms. I love them. They constantly have, please stay, tomorrow needs you, no one can write your story, no one can play your part. It takes intention. It takes intention. And so you have to look for those supports, and it's hard and it's sad sometimes to choose to stay and keep going. But then you get to have moments like this where I get to be a voice of hope, and saying, like, I get it. And I didn't live your story, but I lived my version of that. I understand brokenness. I have deep wounds and scars, but there's something beautiful to stay for. So I don't know, as long as you forget that's out there in the suffering, but it is.
And it's powerful to have that voice when you had no voice. And the taking the people in the rituals, pushing us to isolation, and then God using people to pull us out of that isolation to bring us to this space where we are. It's beautiful how God does that. I see as a restoration that he does. And we can't heal on our own.
Oh man, I've tried, and not because I want to be alone, but because I don't want to be a burden.
Right.
I don't want to burn people out. I don't want to be abandoned again. All of those things. And it is dark, the things that come out of my mouth. And I have felt for years that I will hurt their souls if they
Right.
associate with me because I'm that bad. But they make a choice to come in and they know what it is. And that companionship, it dispels the lies. It dispels the hold. Again, the lies and, uh, Satan, he masquerades and he covers things and he makes you believe. I have a story I've written, it's called The Box, but where it looks like he's taken everything, including me, but at the end of the story, there's this small white box that remains and he can't touch it. He can't get into it. And the truth is, that there's something in us that can't be touched. It can't be changed. It can't be marred. He can make us think that it is. He can do everything he can. He can scream and hurt and all those things, but there's this beauty in us he can't touch. And so, when we start to remember that is always true. He cannot change truth, and God is a being of truth. Jesus Christ is truth. And so if we hold on to that and let that fight and disperse that darkness and those lies, and it takes time, and you have to do it over and over again. I'm like, I thought we did this, but nope, we have to do it again. So it's not a one and done thing, but it can become our habit. It can become where we turn to first. And whether we align with it or not, truth is truth. God in us is greater than anything that can ever happen to us. But it's a long journey. It's hard.
How can the arts help us to heal?
Oh my goodness. As when we're recalling trauma, or it's like, for me, like if I remember something, it might be a moment at a time, and just saying the words is not really it's so vacant. It's hollow in a lot of ways of saying this happened. I'm like, but you don't understand. It like literally ripped my soul out and like obliterated it and like threw it to the onto the sea, and I no longer have. And so with arts, with and I feel like everyone has multiple ways of expressing themselves. I'm an artist. I also write, but there's dance. There are different ways to express, like the impact of trauma. But there's also, in the same space, we can bring in that light and hope. And I say do both. I don't think we should just be happy and like be painting sunshine all the time. I've done both. I'll usually do, if I need to express a dark part of my story, like my pattern is to follow that up with some redemptive piece where, and that's intentional. I don't want to leave it there. I want to make sure that I've brought Christ into that story as much as I can. But, sometimes it is just sad. And so I highly recommend expressing yourself in whatever way you can. to tell your story, but also to incorporate the healing. And there are different templates out there, different people who work with art or writing or things like that you can access, and you can just go freestyle too. I don't follow a lot of direction ever in my life, and so I'm all about freestyle, do whatever you feel. So yeah, we need to express it. We need to tell our story, and sometimes that's, again, the experience. Sometimes it's just the impact. Like, I need someone to see how deep this went, and then again, how deep the healing light can reach. It's all of it.
Right. You talked to me earlier that we can never remember everything that happened to us. You said that, when they come to us in just a couple second increments of flashes. Can you talk a little more about that? How did that work for you? Does somebody need to make a whole memory? Do we need to try to look at everything that was going on in a ritual around us? How much information do we need?
I think we need as much information as we need. Especially in the beginning, we were just naive. It was a bad plan. We tried to get memory after memory after memory. We'd spend hours and hours and hours recalling memory and writing it down and giving it to, law enforcement. And I realized that was really bad for me. It put me in perpetual crisis. And at the same time, it was demanding my attention. So it's a hard thing. For me, especially with the DID, where I am now and where I've been, I think for the last few years has been, if I have a part of me that's carrying a burden or carrying something they need me to know so they can release it, so they can have rest, I receive it. And sometimes it isn't an entire memory. Sometimes it's just a moment or 30 minutes of something because they hold this piece. So now my intention is to see and receive with support, if possible, something that will relieve these parts of me of the burden that they've carried for 50 years, and so, and some, especially in the beginning, I think it was, although destructive, I also needed to know, because I needed to get out. I needed to know kind of the depth of what was happening, the extent of it, so I could get out. Because while I'm dissociating and my parts are holding everything, I was still going back and being abused every day. So I didn't know I needed to leave and change my name and disappear off the planet to my abusers. So it's awful and hard and scary and dangerous, I think, at times to remember. So it has to be done carefully. I think, was it Bessel van der Kolk? I can't remember if it was him, but they stress to not recall memory until you're in a place of stability, general stability. And I'm like, good luck, with us, because that's fleeting at times. It does make sense though. If someone is very raw, unsafe, that is not a good time to pull memory. It's not a good time. It's helping them get their nervous system regulated and know that they're safe and have supportive parts that come up who can help cushion this to receive that information. So there are better times than others, but yeah, especially with the abuse that went on for 21 years, if I were to recall every memory, I would spend the rest of my life doing that. So my deal with God, because I tell him how it's going to be all the time, is now I'm like, just help me know if I have to remember something, please help it not be a repeat of this other, unless I have a part that needs to be relieved, to be healed, or if it can be helpful, to an investigation, or, if I just need to be free from that burden, I don't know I'm carrying, this weight of guilt or there are things that are still in there that are so deep that I don't know. So I can't bring the light to it because I don't know it's there. So I feel like we need to be wise and slow and careful with a lot of support, a lot of time, and heal as you go. Like, I'm an athlete. I cycle with these guys. They're major intense, but I'm also an Ironman at 70.3. And you don't get to Ironman, day one. It's like you progressively gain your strength. I didn't run so much, but you build, and then you kind of heal those muscles a little bit. Then you build and heal. And a lot of us don't think we have time to heal because it just comes like, it's so intense. It feels like it never stops. But if you take moments when you can and heal and just breathe, or I'm terrible at breathing. So I know I'm saying that to people who probably don't really breathe much, but eat chocolate. I don't know, whatever helps you stabilize. Just being mindful. It is so hard when it's assaulting you. It's something you can't necessarily control, but I always say control what you can. And yeah, I don't think it, at least in my case, I can't ever remember everything. I don't need to. And it's not the episodes of trauma per se that are what's traumatic at this point. It's the impact of those events. And so it's the shame, it's these things that I need to heal. And I think that also might be Bessel van der Kolk, but he quotes a lot of people. So Bessel van der Kolk et al. It's the impact. Yes, we need to know what happened, but that can be over there. It's like, what did it do to me? What did it do to my parts? How did it create these parts? How do I need to minister to my little ones inside? What's the impact? And so I think that's what we need to tend to as much as we can, more than detail. And again, not saying detail is not important. I'm just saying the impact is what is remaining, is what's important to work with.
Right. And remembering that it's a marathon and not a dash. It's not a sprint. I mean, we all start, it's like, I'm going to get through this faster than anybody has ever gone through it before. And it just, and two, when you have those points of peace, be willing just to stay there and enjoy them for a while.
I know.
Yeah.
You know what, that is a good point. And I've worked with some of my human trafficking survivors. If you've been traumatized, your nervous system, your baseline is way up here. So anytime that life isn't right here, you feel like something's wrong. At least I do. I'm like, right. I'm not anxious. There is no crisis like coming at me. What do I do? It's uncomfortable. And sometimes I think I've created chaos just because I'm a little more comfortable in that space. But we can learn to tolerate it and welcome it and hold it. But yeah, it's important to recognize even when you're uncomfortable, at peace.
Right.
And then we've got to figure that out so we can have peace and be safe.
Yeah, and we can be. It's just like, I know for me, when I was growing up, I wasn't happy very often, but if I was excited about something and my abuser would say, I know you're happy now, but I just want you to know that this is going to bottom out and you're going to be worse than you were before. And so you learn not to be happy.
Kind of impending doom.
It is, and yeah. So learning that it's okay to have that. It's okay to explore that. It's okay to explore peace. Like that moment of your dog's running the fence with a neighbor's dog. It's like, I am in this moment and this is nice.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be any major fireworks or a lottery win or anything like that. Just those small things are where I find those moments.
Well, I feel like because our trauma is so huge, we feel like maybe healing and peace should also be huge, but it isn't. It's in the fabric of our daily life. And of course it can be big, but yeah, it's really complicated to try to heal. It's really complicated. I mean, it's possible, worth it. and we have to just be persistent and mindful, and still I'm like, I just want to fall into someone's arms and have them take it away. But yeah, it's I don't know, just remembering too that we are so powerful and we are dynamic, we are smart, we are capable, and we don't always want to be, but we are, and we can do this. And then, like for me, I broke the chain of abuse. So my kids, they don't have this trauma. They have secondary trauma from me and, not understanding all my impact. But, there is a discord inside. I think that chain breakers, they just might not always get to like that peaceful state. But knowing that we stopped this, it stopped here. We do pay a price for that, but then our children or the people we help love and serve won't ever have to go through that. This pain and suffering, at least for me, it has meaning. It has a greater calling, and changing something, changing history is not a small bit of work. And we don't have a guide. We're creating the guide. I'm constantly like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what the healthy thing is. I never had that modeled. So you do your best, and then your kids, they just don't have these wounds. So in the struggle that remains, I feel like there is, again, for me, a greater calling and meaning in, again, breaking chains, impacting suffering for others, naming evil, naming good and light good. It's sacred and it's hard.
And you're creating a nonprofit. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it's called the Healing Center for Complex Trauma. And so we're specifically will be serving complex trauma survivors. And so that would be human trafficking, torture, SRA, however that CPTSD shows up. And right now we're just in the education support. We create webinars because we have to raise a lot of money. We'll start with an outpatient clinic that is just geared to CPTSD with services such as, art therapy and dance and movement and occupational therapy, and of course, case managing and all of the life skills that need to be learned. Because, we came through this, at least I did, with a deficit, not empowered, not with life skills that would have been fantastic to have, and then we'll have a residential piece added to that over time where, at least for me, there have been periods of time where I couldn't really be home with my kids because my flashbacks were so bad, but being inpatient was also not the best, so that space where you need a little extra support, but not necessarily hospital. And then we will incorporate more of an acute setting where they do have inpatient abilities, if they are suicidal or self-harm, or, they're endangering, a danger to themselves or others, and they just need that really tight support system around. So that is the big picture. We'll be starting with the outpatient, and I'm excited, and until we can do that, we can do this, but it takes money, it takes time, and I'm not good with either of those things, but
Right. So if somebody wants to give, where can they go to contribute?
It's called the Healing Center for Complex Trauma.org. So just one word.
Okay. Wonderful. As we close, what would you like to say to society?
To society, meaning at large or victors or?
Society at large.
Let's go with society. I like that. Just because you've never seen it or you don't have an orientation toward it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And one of the worst things you can do to a survivor or a victor is to discredit them and tell them that what they are telling you or what they've experienced is not real. That is, there have been so many entities that have tried to discredit survivors rather than support them. I worked with a friend at the Attorney General's office here in Utah and he said this about human trafficking, but it does apply here as well. He said the more unbelievable a story is, the more believable it should be, because why would anyone make that up? Why would anyone? And if you can't see it, if you don't acknowledge it, you can't affect it, you can't change it. And as long as people are saying that doesn't exist, it isn't real, then the resources are not going to be there to fight it. They're not going to be there to shut it down. And so that's the actual trauma. But then for a survivor, when you're looking at behavior and you're judging or you're seeing something that is not pleasant or admirable, I say step back and just consider for a second, had you gone through any amount of their experience, would you be acting or living differently? It's quite likely that it would have taken you out. And so we're constantly interacting with noble, brilliant, beloved beings that went through something horrific that we can't imagine. And so instead of judging, we should look at them and you regard them in awe. And it's, what can I do? How can I support you? Rather than, why don't you? And so Father Gray Boyle, I just love him so much. He talks about going to the margins, to the easily despised, for the demonized, with them. And as we merge, as we come together as the body of Christ, as his beloved children, all equally beloved, then the margins start to blur and we see ourselves in each other. And we have mirror neurons, we mimic, we see ourselves in each other. And as we enter someone's darkness with our light, they start remembering their light. And we can't survive and thrive and heal as victors or survivors without the impact of others. We just can't. And so I love how, again, Father G, he says he'll never be more noble or brave than the people he works with. He doesn't see himself as a step above. He sees himself, on this equal plane. And I would say that my friends probably do that as well. There are times I need them to be up here because I am like reaching, like I need help, but we're equals, we're friends, and so the more we can do that, the more we can see people as kin, we're friends, we coexist, we all have this common goal of living and loving and thriving. Then those barriers come down and there's just more healing. So so much. But again, believe it's happening. If you don't see it, if you don't name it, you can't impact it. Believe the survivor, see them as just, again, glorious, beloved beings, and then just join them in their story as much as you can.
That's great. Would you like to also speak to victors? I'm trying to change that.
Oh, yes. This is something I've come to know through just pain and suffering and really wrestling with it. There was a time, like most of my life, that I fully believed that they got to my soul, that they darkened every part of me. And I really was genuinely afraid that if anyone got to know me, that, well, for one, I'd be thrown away. I would be discarded, but that I would literally hurt them. Not physically, but just the essence of me would hurt the essence of them. And again, with that box, and I condensed that by so many minutes, but there's a truth in us that cannot ever be changed no matter what happens, no matter what happens. And when we, I guess, become curious about it, we can entertain the thought that that light is in us, then it can start to reveal itself to us. It's always there. It's never gone, but maybe we're not seeing it, and we're letting, or not letting, we're just seeing it through the guise of trauma and darkness. And then for me, this was my process. I wanted it to be true. I wanted it so bad to be true. So I started thinking about it. And then I started acting as if it were true. And then I'm living in that truth. And so it's progressive. And it's one of my friends, because I kept saying, I am bad, I'm this, and she just stopped me. And she said, every time you say the words I am, that is the name of God. And that is the name of God in you. And, it's honor that. And I can't say I am without thinking I am, this being, connected to God and Jesus Christ, who has them in me. So I'll start on this negative thing and I'll pull it back. Like, I'm light. I'm capable. I am loving, and it sounds a lot easier than it is. I'm not saying it's a wrestle. I wrestle hard with God all the time. It's knock down, drag out all the time. So I'm not saying it's easy, but it's worth it. To take back your power, to remember who you are, to live in that power and strength. And just one more, I know I go on and on, but if you've ever seen Labyrinth, and I know it's a little dark, but Sarah is, at one point, she just says, you have no power over me, and everything shatters, this world she's in, and she comes back. And I don't know, I think of that, it's like, you have no power over me, and just let that darkness fall away, and hold on to the light. Let it capture, hold you and heal you.
Wonderful. This has been delightful. You are so strong. You are so wise. And you say things in a way that you can grasp and hold on to and look at, which I greatly appreciate.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today.
It's been such an honor. I'm a lot of times when I present or speak about trauma, you can't really bring in the Christian themes, or I don't always censor because it's just who I am, but you have to use the right language for the right audience. So it is a joy to be able to talk about the hope that I know, that is in Christ, and to declare that boldly, because I have earned that voice. I've fought hard for it, and I'm so grateful to be able to share that.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate it. And again, if somebody wants to give to your charity, the Healing Center for Complex Trauma.org.
Yes.
And how else can they find you if they want to connect?
My website. Let's do Kimberli.Koen. Wait, Kimberli.hcct@gmail.com. That's my email. And I'm also on Facebook, Kimberli Koen, and it's Kimberli with an I. I have a website that's an unexpectedlight.com, but we're working on updating it. But that ultimately will be a good place to find me, an unexpectedlight.com. And then there are some of my pieces of art at herobands.com. And that's another survivor who's just a gloriously strong, beautiful soul. And so there are a few of my pieces of my journey, of that light being remembered, that are there. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.